response, Attorney Stefani Kovarbasich.
Judge, I'm going to give the opening statement in this case. Judge, it's not too often that I get to represent the victim in a case, but today the evidence in this case will show that Danny is a victim. When Danny was about 12 or 13 years of age, he was playing in a park, and Dwayne T. Hurley was walking his dog. And like many people in our community that try to search out young boys, Dwayne had his lure. And Dwayne T. Hurley's lure was his dog. So what he would do is he would walk his dog and maybe unleash it, and the dog would go over to the group of boys that were playing, and they would pet the dog, and Dwayne would come over, and he'd engage the boys in a conversation. And these people, like Dwayne T. Hurley, they know what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody that they can groom. And they have like an antenna, and they know who's vulnerable. They look for the poor kid. They look for the kid whose family doesn't have very much. Somebody that he can sort of bring into his world. And Danny was that person. So they meet. Dwayne starts coming over to the park, and eventually he asks Danny if he'd walk his dog for him. So Danny walks the dog for Dwayne, and then he brings the dog back to Dwayne, and Dwayne says, "Man, I really appreciate that, young man. I'm going to give you $30 for walking my dog." 13-year-old kid's thinking, "Man, this is pretty good. I get $30 for walking this guy's dog." And Dwayne says, "Hey, if you want to, come on over to my house, and I got some chores around the house, and maybe you can earn yourself some money, help out your family by cutting my lawn, washing my car, walking my dog. Just do some things for me." So Danny, he starts to go over to Dwayne's house. It's not a quick thing. It's not something that happens right away. As a matter of fact, these predators, like Dwayne T. Hurley, they know how to do it. They start small. What they do is they sort of become somebody that the family trusts. We hear about it all the time. And the evidence in this case will show us that Danny's family, even though they thought it was strange that Dwayne lived by himself, was never married, and liked to be around young boys, they thought, well, maybe everybody's got it wrong. That Dwayne is a good-hearted fellow, and you know what? He's helping out our son, and as a matter of fact, he's even helping out our family. He's giving us groceries. He's doing things for us that we can't afford to do. So Dwayne starts to become like the grandfather of the family. Matter of fact, Danny said, he wasn't just a friend. We felt like he was a grandfather to us. The problem is that Dwayne also had his ulterior motives. Not only Danny, but his brother Greg will tell you that sometimes they'd go over to Dwayne's house and he'd play little games with them. He'd say, "Hey, how many different ways can you describe the word penis? How many ways can you say the word penis? Cock, dick." And they'd go through and play this game, and they thought Dwayne was just joking around. He's just a funny guy. But that's the start of the grooming. That's where it all begins. And then Dwayne starts to, maybe leave his computer on because he knows that Danny and Greg like to look at his computer. And maybe in the beginning it's pornography, but it's what we consider normal pornography. It's the pornography where we have a girl and a guy engaged in sexual conduct, and you sort of Dwayne's sort of a normal guy, he's looking at regular pornography, and we get to look at it too. And for a 13, 14-year-old kid, getting to look at a little pornography, not too bad. As a matter of fact, this even carried over to Danny's house. His dad caught him looking at pornography on the cable, so what he did is he cut out the cable because he didn't want Danny looking at pornography anymore. And then Dwayne moves to the next step. Then it becomes the gay porn. It becomes a pornography that shows two men engaged in sexual conduct. And the evidence in this case will show you that Dwayne had on his computer gay porn, men placing their penises in the rear end of other men. Many times not even focusing on the face, just focusing on the act of anal sex. And you sort of get into that stage. And then you get into the stage where it starts to be young boys. Then you start getting into the area where it really becomes criminal. And this predator, Dwayne T. Hurley, knew that Danny would access his computer and might stumble upon some of this pornography that was illegal, and that was young boys around the ages of 13 to 16 engaged in sexual conduct. Matter of fact, Dwayne even liked to take pictures of Danny. Not only just Danny petting the dog or sitting on a couch, but also Danny sleeping. Because Dwayne, in his warped world, decided that this was going to be his love interest. That Danny was going to be his boyfriend. He was going to be more than just a young kid who came over and cut his lawn, washed his car, walked his dog. No, this was going to be a guy he was going to groom to be his lover. So, how does it start off? Well, Dwayne's got some of the nice things that young boys like. And especially fast and attractive cars. He's got the Corvette, and he's got the Plymouth Prowler. Believe me, the evidence will show that anybody would be attracted to a Plymouth Prowler. There's not many of them out there, and it looks like one of the cars from the 30s or 40s that was modified to look like a hot rod. So Dwayne has the hot rod, he's got the Corvette, and even before Danny can drive a car, Dwayne takes out the keys and says, "Hey, Danny, go ahead. Take my car." In the beginning, he'd let him use his everyday car and let him take it for a ride, oftentimes by himself. And then he'd say, "Hey, Danny, you want to? You can take the keys to the Corvette and you can back it just up and down the driveway. Don't take it out, just up and down the driveway. Just see how you like it. See how it feels." And then, this is not something that just happens overnight. This grooming continues and continues. And it's something that's not easy for any kid to admit. It's not something that's easy for any kid to talk to a police officer and say, "Yeah, I was engaged in a sexual relationship with Dwayne T. Hurley." So when the police talked to him, he didn't tell them anything. He said Dwayne was a little bit weird. Dwayne talked about penis jokes and things like that, but no, there was nothing ever sexual. The telling thing is, the officer said to Dwayne, and the evidence will show in this case, the officer said, to Danny, he said, "Danny, in these kind of cases, it's usually something involving sex and sexual abuse, or it's involving drugs." And at the end of the conversation, even though Danny's never said anything, he says to the officer, he says, "It's one of those two things you mentioned." And we know it wasn't drugs. And the evidence in this case will show us that it was sex. So, now, Dwayne's starting to make his move. He knows he's got Danny talking about sex, looking at gay porn, looking at young kids engaged in anal sex. So then he starts dangling his keys out. He says, hey, Danny, you want to use the car? Danny'd say, yeah, Dwayne, I'd like to use your car. Well, just let me see your penis. Matter of fact, what Dwayne would do is when he'd go to the restroom a lot of times, he'd leave the restroom door open. And when he was urinating, Danny walked by, maybe use the computer or walk from the living room to the bedroom, because the computer was in the bedroom. And Dwayne would sort of turn at him, and Danny would go, hey, Dwayne. Oh, that ain't nothing. Yeah. So it just starts that way. Then the next thing that starts is Danny's in the restroom urinating. And guess who just happens to open the door? Dwayne comes in, sees Danny holding his penis. No big thing, Danny. So the next thing they move to is, you want to use the car, Danny? You like to use the car? Just show me your penis. No, I'm not going to do that, Dwayne. Before you know it, this young kid, yeah, he's showing his penis. Now you think that a 14, 15, 16-year-old wants to tell somebody the first time they meet him that they're showing their penis to Dwayne T. Hurley? I don't think so. This is a process. The evidence will show that it was a process in this case to even get this information. So, starts off just showing his penis. Then the next thing is, hey, Danny, could I just touch it? I just want to touch it. And before you know it, Dwayne T. Hurley, about 2 weeks before this homicide took place, has Danny on the couch. Because occasionally Danny would sleep over there. And Danny feels somebody as he's sleeping on top of him. But at this point, he doesn't want to admit that Dwayne was anally penetrating him. He wanted to think that he wouldn't allow himself to put himself in this position where he would let this predator, this pedophile, this sick man stick his penis into his rear end. So he just pretended he was sleeping. Now, why? Because his parents couldn't afford to do the things that Dwayne Hurley did for him. He's just getting his license. He's got a girlfriend, Katie, who he'd like to impress with his Corvette or his Prowler. And before you know it, as if in a dream, he wakes up the next morning and he says, I just felt full inside. I felt full. I don't think the evidence is going to show in this case that Danny's going to get up on that witness stand and admit to you that he was anally penetrated. But I think it's going to be obvious that he was. Danny had a special thing happening to him a few days after January 22nd, 2010. The special thing is that he and Katie had been together for 1 year. Their anniversary, for a 16-year-old, something special was happening that Sunday. And that special thing was that he was planning a special dinner between himself and Katie. And the evidence in this case will show that he planned to buy Chinese food, buy her 13 roses, 12 to symbolize the 12 months that they had been together, and one rose to symbolize how special she was in his life. He was going to lay those roses out in front of her window. He's going to put the 12 in one bunch, the one in another bunch, and he was going to treat her to a special dinner. Well, Danny's mom and dad knew about this special dinner, but they told him that, we'll help you with this, but you got to go to school. And that was a problem for Danny. Danny didn't like going to school. He didn't think that he needed to be at life skills. Matter of fact, Dwayne told him that he'd help him get a tutor so he wouldn't have to go to school. So the morning of the 22nd, goes over to Dwayne's house. Dwayne's family thinks that Dwayne's going to drop him off at school. And he goes in, and the whole night he had been texted that weekend, special with her. That was what his plan was. The most important thing in his life was not planning somebody's killing, not intending to kill somebody, but to have a special day with Katie. So he goes over to Dwayne's house, and Dwayne says, "Hey, Danny, don't worry. You don't have to go to school today. Stay here with me, and I'll take care of the arrangements with Katie. I'll help you get the Chinese food. I'll help you get the roses. But you got to pay me back." And at this point, Danny knew what Dwayne meant. So Danny said, "Well, Dwayne, I'm going to make some coffee. I'm going to make myself a little something to eat, smoke a cigarette." Sat and watched television for a while. And then Dwayne says, "Hey, Danny, I'm going to go in the bedroom and I'm going to lay down. You're ready, come on in." Now, Danny knows the most important thing in his life may not be available if he doesn't submit to Dwayne. He goes into that bedroom, and Dwayne is laying on the bed, exactly as the prosecutor said, face down. And Danny goes over, tries to get onto the computer, trying to delay, and he sees Dwayne look at him. And he's seen this look in Dwayne before. This is the look where Dwayne wants something in return for what he's going to give Danny. And Danny sees this pickle jar that's on the bed. Next to the bed. And he takes that pickle jar and he smashes it into Dwayne's head. And he does it because of what Dwayne has done to him and what Dwayne intends to do to him again. And he is angry. He is enraged. He is under extreme stress because of what Dwayne has not only done to him for the last 3 or 4 years, but also for what Dwayne intends to do on this particular day. And after smashing Dwayne in the head with this pickle jar, Dwayne gets up out of the bed and makes a comment like, "Why did you do that?" And Danny reaches into his pocket and takes out his pocket knife, and he opens it and he stabs Dwayne twice. But his knife breaks. If it wouldn't have broken, he would have stabbed him more than that. So, he runs out of the room, runs to the kitchen, and gets another knife. Still in this extreme state of rage and passion, and grabs a knife out of the kitchen, comes back, and Dwayne is at the landing. He punches Dwayne a few times. He hits him with this knife so many times that he doesn't even know how many times. Yeah, the prosecutor's right. The evidence in this show will show that he was in extreme rage, extreme passion for what Dwayne had not only done to him, but what Dwayne was intending to do to him again, and again, and again, and again, until he was stopped. He then leaves Dwayne's residence. He disposes of his pocket knife he believes in a sewer, calls his dad, and says, "Dad, Dwayne's dead." His dad picks him up, sees his son covered with blood, takes him over to Mark's to see what they should do. He's obviously in some extreme stress. His heart's beating 1,000,000 miles a minute. His dad's afraid he's going to have a heart attack. He knows that Danny has a weak heart anyhow. And he gets him over to St. John's West Shore. Danny talks to the police. And he minimizes everything. He minimizes everything. Now, he's going to open right up to the police, and he's going to say, "Yeah, I've been involved with Dwayne T. Hurley in gay sex for the last few years. He's been touching my penis. I've been touching his penis. He's been masturbating me. He's anally penetrated me, and I just wasn't going to have it happen anymore. Because I knew it was going to happen again, and I wasn't going to be violated." And by the time, at the end of this case, Your Honor, you're going to find that this young man was sufficiently provoked to engage in the conduct that he engaged in. That he was under a fit of rage, sudden passion, which caused him to kill this predator, this sick man, Dwayne T. Hurley. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Attorney Bradley. I think we can take a 10-minute break and State can prepare some next witness.
Thank you.
We're in recess.